Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping right into something, well, really interesting, a paradox. Imagine this big cultural institution, right? A cornerstone for ages. But now, it's described as being on life support.
Yeah, scary stuff. Drawing funds from older folks, maybe near collapse.
But, and this is the twist, at the exact same time, our sources are telling us there's this, movement of God is like a tornado.
Right, touching down, shaking things up in really surprising ways.
It really is that best of times, worst of times situation.
And you nailed it. That's what we're digging into.
Yeah.
We're not going to dwell on the decline today. No, we're looking at the flowering part.
Okay.
The leaders, the organizations that are actually, well, breaking the code, as our sources put it. Finding new paths when others are just trying to hang on.
So that's our mission today, then. Uncover what these code-breaking leaders are doing, their best practices.
Exactly. Learn from them, see how they handle the tough stuff, how they innovate.
And we're pulling this from some really compelling sources, especially excerpts from something called Best Practices of Leaders.
That's the one. So, yeah, let's unpack it. Let's get started.
Okay, so to get everyone on the same page, our sources lay out this context. Since around the mid-70s, the culture shifted, right? Moved away from that traditional Judeo-Christian outlook.
A big shift.
And the church, well, it reacted in mainly two ways. First, lots of folks adopted this refuge mentality.
Right, like hunkering down, survival mode, protecting their own community, maybe pulling back from the wider world.
Exactly. But then there were others, they went for radical obedience.
Ah, yeah, the risk takers.
Totally. Pushing boundaries, innovating. I mean, the sources say they sometimes made mistakes, maybe went too far.
Sure, that happens with innovation.
But ultimately, they were the ones leading the way, exploring new ground.
And, it's insightful how specific movements played into this, like the seeker movement or the purpose-driven movement, especially back in the 80s and 90s.
How so? What did they do?
Well, they were real paradigm busters. Think about the seeker movement churches deliberately tried to connect with people who weren't, traditionally religious.
Focusing on their questions, their needs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And purpose-driven. That brought a sharp focus on mission, on strategy for impact. Both really pushed the church outside the box from, say, the 50s or 60s models.
Okay.
They basically gave permission, you could say, to become more missional.
Meaning more active out in the world, not just inward looking.
Precisely. They really shifted the whole landscape.
Which leads us nicely to this idea of the missional church today. Our sources describe it as taking off the shackles of modernity. It's about being the incarnational body of Christ now.
Which sounds complex, but it really means being actively present, engaged in the community, living out beliefs in really practical, tangible ways, not just talking about it.
Got it.
And a huge part of these churches is that drive, that mission to break the code.
Right.
And what's fascinating is just how different they look.
Yeah.
I mean, really diverse.
How so?
Well, where they meet houses, storefronts, community centers, parks, you name it. The people involved, all different groups, cultures, their worship styles, how they communicate. It's incredibly varied.
Okay.
But, and this is key, despite all that outward difference, they share these common foundational characteristics, things that make them work.
So, okay, what does this actually mean for you listening? How can we use these insights? We're going to dive into the specific practices, the things that keep showing up across all these different emerging churches that are breaking the code.
Let's do it.
All right, practice number one that really defines these leaders, forward thinking. Our sources say it's not just thinking, it's asking the right questions of the right people.
And that immediately begs the question, who are the right people?
Good question.
The sources are pretty clear. They're the unreached and disconnected folks in North America, people with little or no Christian memory.
So not the usual church crowd.
Not at all. Often they'd call themselves agnostic, maybe questioning God's existence.
Oh.
Or even agnostic, meaning they're just, unaware of Christian faith, not necessarily against it.
Okay.
These are people who rarely, if ever, step into a traditional church service. They might say, oh, this is my first time in church in 20, 30, 40 years.
Or maybe never before.
Or literally never. For them, church often seems, boring, irrelevant, or hypocritical.
And there's a great example of this, right? Rick Warren before he started Saddleback.
Classic example. Yeah. Before planting that church in Orange County, he went out and just asked people questions like, what's the biggest need around here? Or why don't most people go to church?
Simple questions, but powerful.
Totally. And the big takeaway isn't just copying his questions, obviously. It's about adapting that principle. You have to seek those outside perspectives for your specific place, your context.
That makes sense, because it's easy to get stuck in your own bubble.
Oh, absolutely. That's what Stanley, Joyner, and Jones warn about becoming insider-focused. It's natural. You hang out with people who think like you, and pretty soon, you're convinced your way is the only way.
And you miss what's actually happening outside.
Completely. You miss the real needs, the changing perspectives of the very people you hope to connect with.
So, okay, they ask the right questions, but it goes deeper. They also get that the future is already happening.
Yes, that's such a key insight. Reggie McNeil put it brilliantly. He said, we think we are headed toward the future. The truth is, the future is headed toward us. And it's in a hurry.
Wow, that's a great line.
Isn't it? Think about it.
Yeah.
Henry Ford and his cars, or commercial flights, or everyone having a cell phone. People thought that was crazy talk once.
True.
These leaders, they see it coming. They anticipate. Like the source says, the church of the future was planted last year.
Meaning these code breakers are already doing tomorrow's stuff today.
Pretty much. They're scouting the frontiers.
Yeah.
They're the paradigm busters, the early adapters. They are, as the source puts it, seldom late. They're already operating in that future landscape.
Okay, so they see what's coming. What else? There's a third part to this forward thinking.
Yes. They actively learn their way forward.
Learn their way forward. What does that mean in practice?
It means, fundamentally, rethinking success and failure.
How so?
Well, the author of our source tells this great story. Someone asked him when he was thinking about planting a church, but what if you fail?
Yeah, the classic fear question.
Right. And his answer was powerful. He said, if I don't attempt it, I've already failed.
Ooh, I like that.
It reminds me of Winston Churchill. You know, his definition of success.
Yeah.
The ability to go from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm.
So it's not about never failing.
Not at all. It's about seeing every attempt, successful or not, as learning, evaluating outcomes, building a culture where your team feels safe enough to take smart risks.
Instead of a culture where everyone's afraid to mess up.
Exactly. Avoiding that atmosphere of suspicion or lack of trust. It's about embedding learning right into the DNA, turning those failures into vital data for the next step.
Makes sense. Okay, let's move to the next core practice. Our sources say these leaders are incredibly willing to pay the price.
Yeah, this one's huge. Breaking new ground, breaking the code. It demands incredible sacrifices.
Is there an example of that?
Oh, definitely. Think of Harold Bullock at Hope Church in Texas. The source highlights the incredible price he paid.
What did he do?
Instead of just focusing all resources on building up his own local campus into a giant church, he prioritized developing leaders and multiplying churches globally.
So investing outwards more than inwards.
Exactly, a long-term vision. And the result, over 90 churches planted around the world by people who came through Hope. That's paying a price for a bigger vision.
Wow. So if you're listening and you want to break new ground, what should you expect?
Expect to be called to hard places to serve, places that will demand a lot from you personally.
Okay.
Research is really clear. Connecting with people who are disconnected, no matter the field, it comes with a tremendous price. And it will cost us on every front.
Every front. Like what?
Well, first, it's physical. It's just plain hard work.
Right. Long hours.
Totally. Lynn Hybels described her husband Bill's schedule back in '74. Teaching multiple nights, running tournaments, gym nights, all in 1 week. Exhausting, just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Then it's emotional. The source talks about it being lonely on the front end of vision.
That makes sense, when you're the only one seeing it clearly.
Exactly. Sean Lovejoy talks about church planters syndrome, that mix of isolation and strain. He even tells this story about his first event where nobody showed up.
Oh, wow. That must have been crushing.
He said he literally crawled up into the fetal position and cried himself to sleep. That's real emotional cost.
Yeah. What else?
Third, it's relational. Innovators often get misunderstood. Ministry or any kind of pioneering leadership can be a lonely place.
Because you're out ahead of the curve.
Right. Then financial. If you're reaching people who don't already have a connection, it just takes years and years to develop a solid financial base. Much longer than connecting with people who already buy in.
Okay, that's a practical reality.
And finally, maybe the biggest cost is spiritual. Leaders have to prepare for spiritual warfare, that intense opposition, the draining challenges.
So what do?
They need to surround themselves with prayer and support, and crucially, submit to high levels of accountability. That helps sustain them through the pressure.
It really sounds like you need to know what you're getting into. Like Jesus said, right? Count the cost before you start building.
Exactly. Luke 14, it's a fundamental principle for any big undertaking.
Okay, let's talk practice number 3. This one's defining. Leaders who break the code build great teams.
Absolutely critical.
The key observation is they seldom, if ever, do it alone.
Almost never.
Which brings up that vital question. Who are you bringing to the party with you? Who's on your team?
And we see amazing examples. Andy Williams, he had 5 couples who literally left their homes, their jobs, to move and help him build Harvest Church from scratch.
Wow, that's commitment.
Huge commitment. Or Vance Pittman. He didn't go to Las Vegas alone. He brought a full staff, 4 pastors, plus many families to start a ministry there.
In Sin City, no less.
Right. And now it's a church of over 1,000 people. These leaders, they don't just have ideas. They inspire people to take overwhelming risk.
But it can't just be inspiration, can it? You need skills, too.
Oh, absolutely. The sources stress that. It's not just charisma to attract them. It's the abilities and skills to actually lead and manage those people effectively.
So both are needed, charisma and skill.
Both are required. It lines up perfectly with Jim Collins' stuff in Good to Great.
How so?
Remember his point about great companies? They begin with the who before they determine the what.
Get the right people on the bus first.
Exactly. Get the right people on the bus and then determine which seats they need to occupy. Talent first, then strategy.
Got it. Okay, practice number 4. These leaders have a different beginning point.
Yeah, this is about their foundation.
They're grounded in a theological understanding and conviction about what their church or organization should be and do.
Right, it's not just about building something impressive.
No, the source says it is not simply about building a reputation, a ministry, a following, or a great church. Or a great company, for that matter. It's deeper.
It really is. And this is where that emergent church perspective, like from Dan Kimball and Josh Fox at Vintage Faith, is really illuminating.
What's their take?
They talk about this rising feeling that church, for many, had become just a place you go to get your needs met, like a consumer.
Instead of
being a cold local community of God on a mission together, they felt Christianity had sometimes become more about these subcultures. Christian music, special language, church programs.
kind of its own little world.
Yeah, almost a bubble. Instead of being a radically alternative community and way of life that's actually in the world, making a difference.
That's a really sharp distinction. So what did Vintage Faith do about it?
Their approach was about going back to the beginning, looking at Jesus' teachings with fresh eyes.
Trying to strip away the later layers.
Exactly. Discerning what got shaped by, modernity or the evangelical subculture versus what Jesus and the scriptures actually taught. They weren't afraid to ask those hard questions.
Okay.
But, and this is important, this kind of deconstruction wasn't just tearing things down carelessly.
Yeah.
No, the source says it was done with surgical precision, like having the Bible in one hand and the mission of the church in the other.
So careful, deliberate.
Very. Reevaluating things against the core principles, making sure any innovation was still anchored to that foundational truth and purpose.
All right, let's move to the next one. Practice number 5, connecting the dots.
Ah, yes. Vision into action.
These leaders connect vision with strategic direction and focus. Or, put simply, they see the big picture, define the strategic process, and stay focused.
Yeah, that ability to hold all three is rare but crucial. Andy Stanley's work at North Point offers a good framework here.
His 7 practices.
Right. Things like clarify the win, think steps, not programs, and narrow the focus. That really captures these 3 elements. Big picture, clear process, staying on track.
So let's break that down. First, seeing the big picture. Henry Blackaby had an interesting take on vision, didn't he?
He did. He stressed that for God's people, it's about revelation, not just human-generated vision.
Revelation being something you receive, an understanding of God's purpose.
Exactly. Different from just dreaming something up yourself. And he showed how practical this revelation can be. He talked about literally gritting out a map of a Canadian province to figure out how to reach every single part of it.
Wow, that's detailed.
Amazingly practical, right? It wasn't just a lofty idea. It was discerning a larger purpose that then informed every single step.
Okay, so you see the big picture, the revelation, then comes defining the process. How do you actually get there?
This needs those clear roadmaps, simple, sequential, achievable steps.
Like Rick Warren's baseball diamond.
Perfect example. Or Heibel's 7 steps. Or Stanley talking about moving people from the church foyer to the living room to the kitchen table.
Metaphors for a clear path.
Exactly. Simple, elegant ways to show people the journey.
And the third part, staying focused. You
Yeah.
mentioned this is tough, especially in North America.
It really is. Because it's easy for churches, or any organization really, to drift towards just meeting the consumer needs of believers or existing customers.
Giving people what they want right now.
Right. But the sources say these code-breaking churches, they are not interested in consumption as the main goal. They're committed to meeting needs of people who are disconnected.
So they have to manage that tension between keeping current members happy and reaching outwards.
Constantly. They live with attention. And crucially, they learn to say no to things, even good things, in order that they might ultimately be able to say yes to the right things, the things that truly align with that core outward-focused mission.
That takes discipline. Okay, practice number 6. Leaders are constantly working on it and not simply in it.
Yes. Stepping back from the day-to-day grind.
Taking time to evaluate our current ministry, work, and processes, and envision the future.
Absolutely. Greg Farah, a pastor in Manhattan described as a code breaker, really gets this. He knows he cannot stay in it all the time.
Meaning stuck in the weeds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he regularly looks outside of himself and his team for answers. He actively seeks external perspectives.
I can totally relate to that. I remember meeting with the president of this big resourcing organization once. I had my list of questions ready.
Yeah.
But before I asked anything, he started talking partnership, sharing this much bigger vision. And honestly, that interaction and outside perspective was worth more than gold. It completely reframed things for me, led to a total reinvention of what I was working on.
Wow.
Just by stepping outside my own assumptions, working on it, not just in it. Huge difference.
That's a perfect illustration. And these leaders, they have specific ways they consistently work on it.
Like what? What do they do?
Well, first, they read a lot. Business books, biographies, research, even fiction. They're looking for insights everywhere.
Okay.
Second, they seek out leaders, building relationships, formally or informally, with people who are getting it done, even people who do things totally differently. They see value in diverse approaches.
Makes sense. Learn from everyone.
Third, they use technology, not just for fun, but to enhance their learning. Surfing the web for ideas, listening to coaching podcasts or MP3s.
Learning on the go.
Fourth, they visit others. And interestingly, the source notes they often visit successful businesses, even more than successful ministries, looking for operational excellence, transferable ideas.
That is interesting. Fifth.
They take regular and long breaks. Real study breaks and sabbaticals, not just vacations, but dedicated time away to get perspective, rest, think strategically.
Crucial for avoiding burnout too, I bet.
Absolutely. And finally, they have strategic meetings, pulling their team together specifically to work on it, stepping away from the daily tasks to focus only on the big picture, the processes, the future.
Got it. Okay, the 7th and final practice we're covering. They are interested in kingdom growth.
Yeah, this goes back to that different beginning point, but it's also about a different ending point.
Correct so.
It's not just about building your great church or your successful organization. It's about being and building the church in the biggest sense, the overall mission.
Okay. Can you give an example?
Sure. Ken Adams at Crossroads Church. His church grew hugely from 0 to almost 3,000. But now his main focus is on planting churches and resourcing church leaders way beyond his own congregation.
Multiplying impact.
Exactly. Or the Hope Chapel movement. They've planted over 200 churches globally. Their main campus aims to plant at least one new church every single year. It's a multiplication mindset, not just building their own thing bigger.
So why does this matter to you, the listener? What's the impact of this broader kingdom growth focus?
It matters because, as the sources put it, the church, or any mission-driven organization, is ultimately a means to an end. And the end is the kingdom of God. Meaning the goal is seeing God's influence, God's reign, actually expanding and making a tangible difference in the world. And the results can be pretty amazing.
Like what?
Well, they share this example from Honolulu. They talk about God's kingdom invading our Honolulu. And they point to things like Oahu, seeing a 30% reduction in crime.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and specific areas like Kaneohe and Chinatown seeing crime down by almost 50%. And they connect this partly to community efforts, like these zip code prayer cadres groups focused on praying for and engaging with in specific neighborhoods. tangible change.
That's incredible.
And this approach also shows how these code breakers really understand this brave new postmodern world, as the source calls it.
How do they understand it differently?
They recognize that today people often aren't fazed by logic or intellectual proofs, like trying to prove the resurrection historically.
Okay, so what does connect?
They are impressed by his sufferings, as depicted in the Passion of the Christ. That raw emotional connection resonates. They might not worry much about heaven or hell in abstract terms, but they are blown away by spiritual power when it knocks on their door. They might be unwilling to debate Calvinism, deep theological doctrine,
Right.
but they might be very willing to participate in an exorcism. It shows a shift towards experience, towards tangible encounters with the spiritual, rather than just abstract belief systems.
That's a fascinating insight into the cultural shift. So we've really covered a lot here, these code-breaking leaders. They're forward-thinking, paying the price, building teams.
Having that different starting point, connecting the dots, always working on it.
And that final, crucial focus on kingdom growth, not just their own success. It's quite a picture.
It really is. And if you connect all these pieces, it really leads to a big question for you listening right now.
Okay.
How have your own experiences shaped you as a leader? And thinking about everything we've discussed, what do you need to do practically to keep cultivating that passion for breaking the code in your own context, whatever field you're in?
Powerful questions to chew on. How have you been shaped, and what do you need to do next? We hope this deep dive has given you some really valuable insights into what it takes to truly break the code.